But what has unfortunately happened is, and we all know this, we don't say this out loud, we all know this, because we have defined this in racial terms in the hierarchy of what matters in the US left and even in the global left, we are not talking about this because we have ranked certain pain and suffering higher. And I would say it is intellectually dishonest to, let's just go through a quick list. It's intellectually dishonest to act like this started on October 7th when there's a 2,000-year history of Jewish persecution. It is intellectually dishonest to classify Jewish people as settler colonialists or as white. It is simply to take a relatively recent phenomenon of the racial hierarchies in the United States that emerged about 400 years ago, and to take that and to put it on what is happening right now to understand what is happening in the middle. It is simply intellectually dishonest. It is intellectually dishonest to say that you care about the pain and suffering of people and not speak up about what happened on October 7th. It's also intellectually dishonest to not be as equally heartbroken for the children who are dying in Gaza when Hamas, and not being able to separate the people, right, from Hamas, the terrorist organization. It is intellectually dishonest to not have your heart break for those children just the way my heart breaks for the women of October 7th. And I hope that we can all embrace some intellectual honesty.
Yes, thank you. I think empathy is so important. And again, it's the antidote to intolerance. So, Sarai, you know, one of the things that we've witnessed is obviously anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, but this attitude of treating women as subhuman. My question to you, with all this violence, on the treatment of women as weapons of war, the anti-Semitism and the Islamophobia, what do you think, how do you think this impacts democracy and the world?
Thank you, Daphna. I sat there as I watched the movie with mixed feelings. I was in deep grief, deep anger, and in deep disappointment. Why? Because for 75 years, the lobby of Hamas and the extremists have taken us all for a ride, and we didn't speak up long and hard and strong. And today, the silence of the Muslim communities, not around the US, let's talk about Los Angeles, is deafening, isn't it? Yes. So I was embarrassed. But I remember the words of my father, who would always tell me that we, as a human race, we are either coming from a problem, or we are in a problem, or we are going towards a problem. So let us take heart, and it's so exciting really for me to see every one of us, every one of you here, because those of us who have community, we cannot be victims. And to remember that we have work to do. In that, the question I want all of us to ask is, are we going to go through this, or are we going to grow through this? And today, October 7th has been a defining moment where every one of us, no exceptions, we have to all take a leadership role. We can all do something, and we have to do something. Because as Daphna asked me, anti-Semitism is on the rise. Last week I was speaking on a panel on Jewish-Muslim relationship at the Notre Dame Law School Religious Liberty Initiative. Everybody was talking about religious freedom and liberties internationally. Not one person spoke about the desecration of religious liberties for the Jewish community in the United States of America. And when I did raise that point, so many people came up to me and they thanked me. What that should tell us is, it is our silence that's not going to save us. If you have been following the news, 200 tombstones desecrated in Cincinnati. It is a violation of the Jewish people's religious freedoms and liberties. When the temple in Los Angeles was desecrated, it was a violation of your right to assemble peacefully, because it's a constitutionally guaranteed right. That was violated. There was no Muslim voices. And when Paul Kessler, who lives 30 minutes from where I live in Los Angeles, was murdered for carrying a Jewish flag, not enough Muslims, not one, spoke up against that atrocity. And then we realized, Anila and I, we worked together hand in hand, so deeply, so committedly. We realized we are the leaders we've been waiting for.
Thank you so much, Suraj.
So remember, we have to all come together. Just understand what we want to address. Take heart, because our silence is not going to save us. Thank you.
And also amnesia is unacceptable. Amnesia is our worst enemy. Yes, Ahmad, I was going to get to you because for two reasons. One, you can continue what Soraya was saying, but the second one, we spoke, when you and I spoke, about the plight of women under Hamas in Gaza. Could you please elaborate on how much women were actually suffering in Gaza under Hamas before October 7th?
Certainly, and I just wanted to pick up on a point you mentioned about the silence. Is one of the things that genuinely and sincerely sustains me, despite the continuous challenges and the hatred and the attacks and the attempts to marginalize me or delegitimize me or paint me as a Zionist sellout or a CIA asset or a Mossad agent or this, that. Every day it's a different charge. There are hundreds, and I mean literally hundreds on a monthly basis of Arabs, Muslims, Palestinians that I hear from on social media, in person, etc., who tell me, thank God you're saying what you're saying. We believe it, we want to say it, but unfortunately we can't. I have a family, I'm part of a sprawling Muslim community in the United States, or my family are still in Gaza, etc., etc. So I take inspiration from the fact that there are many who are silently in agreement. Now, the goal is to try to bring some of them out of the shadows. The goal is to say, okay, I can maybe understand if you're in the West Bank or if you're in Gaza or if you're in some other place that, is difficult. You're dealing with the daily realities of life under those circumstances. You have Hamas, you have communal pressure. But if you're in the United States and you're bullied into silence in this unhelpful way, there's a threshold beyond which I start to lose my empathy. Or I don't want to use the word empathy, I'm all about empathy. I start to lose my patience, I should say, for you to not actually speak out, to not leverage your presence, your Western privilege. That is Western privilege that we have a role and a duty to use, which is the privilege of freedom of speech, the privilege of having safety, the privilege of having our basic necessities met. So I absolutely work with this theme of silence and what it means and where it's coming from. As for your earlier question, no doubt, and as part of trying to be nuanced and be accurate, on the one hand, Hamas isn't straight up the Taliban or ISIS in the sense that they are not as fascistic as some of these Islamist terror groups. On the other hand, Hamas has adapted a more sophisticated, more gradual approach, to Islamize the society. And so one of the first things they did when they took over, I got political asylum in the United States when I was 17 years old. And the interview took place on June 14th, 2007, which is the very day that Hamas took over the Gaza Strip. And I was one of the first wave of Palestinians to seek asylum in the United States from Gaza because of their control. And so later in 2007, one of the first things they did, and I remember having a conversation with my dad about it, is, they came up with a rule that women, because Gaza has beaches, and so there are a lot of hookah lounges and water pipes and smoke hookah, whatever, everybody does it. Women cannot smoke hookah in public on the public beach, on the beaches, because that's just it's not civilized, that's the word they use. So it was almost immediate, and then they were they gave some of the public pushback, and then they would roll it back, and then, years later, actually we don't want women to leave Gaza through the Rafah border crossing, the passenger crossing. without the approval of a guardian. And it started with a guardian for the young women, and then they tried to expand it. Well, it has to be a brother or a father or a mahram. And then there was like backlash, and then they were like, okay, fine, we're gonna push back, and then not really. Last year, right before October 7th, there was a young lady that I was helping in Gaza go to Bulgaria to a scholarship. And I was like connecting her with another friend of mine who was teaching her English, and how do you go through the airport, and how do you transfer flights, just basics. She had never been out of Gaza. They met at a coffee shop, and Hamas's morality police, just like in Iran, came up to my friend, and she thankfully made it out of Gaza. They came up to my friend, and the female and the male guy, the young guys, and said, oh, like, are you guys together? Are you married, you know? And they were like, no, we're not married. And they were like trying to ask him questions. Why are two single, unmarried? And it was like 11 in the morning. And my friend, my male friend, actually escalated with them. And to de-escalate, they just decided to walk away. But take this, and or how about violence? How about when the honor killings that Hamas not only doesn't prosecute those who commit those, but actually allows, for example, there are other things, for example, when it comes to splitting of the inheritance, because of the Islamic doctrine that Hamas adopts, they codified in the law that women get half of the inheritance of men, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So you have